I am somewhat of an urban explorer. Kind of. Over the last 2 years, I have been getting into the hobby and had taken to exploring some more well-known abandoned places in my area. I won't bore you with all the shitty places I went to, where I was shaking in my boots over a few rats scurrying over the floor. The scariest place that I went to was an abandoned mall. It wasn't so much that the place was scary, but what I found there. I went there with a friend. The place was locked up tight, and it looked like it was going to take some real work to get into. This place had been abandoned for a few years at the time I went, and I have no idea why it had not been knocked down yet. I also want to mention that darkness was fast approaching when we went, which was probably a stupid idea on my part. We just wanted the atmosphere to be more intense and spooky, I guess. Instead of trying to break open locks or anything, we decided to get onto the roof of the mall. We did this by going through a multi-story parking ramp that was located right next to the place. As you can guess, this was also abandoned because it was semi-connected to / was built for the shopping mall. There was a pretty tall wall that we found, maybe something over 10 feet. We piled whatever random junk we could find to create something makeshift to step on and then climb up to it. After that, we were able to climb over. Once we were inside, we did some exploring and checked out all of the ruined shops. If there was anything interesting left behind, it had been looted long before we got there. The place was completely gutted. Nothing but trash and loose paper scattered everywhere. Not even any broken and discarded furniture remained. We decided to go down to the ground floor just to check out the last part. But honestly, we were thinking of just leaving and cutting our losses. We had been here quite long, and we were already bored. As we were walking through, we started to hear some sounds. This instantly set us on edge, especially when we spotted some lights that were not ours. We dug down and switched off our own flashlights. We thought it might be other urbexers, looters, or maybe even some kind of security that we did not know about. We heard the sound of a radio clicking and some muffled talking. We took our time to sneak back up to the top level, but my friend had to drag me back and put his hand over my mouth. There was a guy there now, blocking our exit. He was dressed in all black, but was wearing some kind of mask. He was facing away from us, so I could only see it strapped on and not actually what kind of mask it was. We were shitting our pants. We didn't know any other way to get out. We decided just to hide for a bit and wait for him to leave, but no dice. He just kept wandering around up there before another guy joined him. They did not speak a word to each other even once. The guy who joined him was holding a weapon, a metal pipe, but he also had a holster that I could see. We needed to get out, and quickly. We whispered to each other for a while, and the front exit was probably our only option. We figured it must have been unlocked since these guys broke in, and we didn't hear any kind of crashing. If not, then we would have to smash through and hope we can run fast enough. We were hoping really hard it would not come to that. We started to hear other people now, wandering around, the sounds of radios and talking, the sound of metal dragging on the floor. We didn't know what kind of gang was holed up here, but we did not care. We waited for our shot and ran for the door. Our hearts were pounding out of our chests, and when we reached the front door, our hearts sank. There was another one of those masked people waiting. It was some shitty cheap plastic mask. A white one, kind of like you would see being worn on Halloween. He immediately reached for his radio, and we heard his voice coming from at least 3 nearby. We screamed and ran, but we had nowhere to go. It wasn't long until we were cornered. All I remember is being hit in the head with metal and everything going black. I woke up I don't know how long later. My hands and feet were bound, and I had some kind of gag in my mouth. My friend was tied up the same way, but was still out cold and lying on the floor next to me. I didn't even bother trying to scream or break free because I knew it was useless. I'm not sure how long later someone came into the room that we were in. I'm not sure whereabouts in the building we were, but it looked like a basement of some kind. We must have either been in the basement of a store on the ground floor, or maybe there was another level underneath. This guy was wearing one of those same cheap, white plastic Halloween masks. The mask had some kind of symbol on it, painted in red. I couldn't really tell what it was supposed to be. Some kind of geometric shape, but I don't know what. When I saw him, I immediately started to panic and tried to scream through my gag and started squirming. He just walked over to me calmly and struck me across the face. He told me that if I shut up, he would remove the gag. I did as I was told, and he did. He went over and roused my friend awake too, and by that I mean I slapped him until he regained consciousness. He told us that we made a big mistake coming into their territory. I tried to ask what he meant, but the second I began to speak, he struck me again. He told me that I will only speak when spoken to, otherwise there will be consequences. He said that first time was the only time he would be lenient with me. He walked around for a bit, making noises and mumbling to himself before kneeling back down to face us. He told us we had two choices. We could either take their initiation and join his society, or we could die. We obviously chose the former. I asked what the initiation was. He grabbed me by the face and punched me in the stomach, and I felt all of the air leave my lungs at once. He told me that he warned me, and that the punishments would only get worse every time I disobeyed. He said that the initiation was a series of tests that we had to undertake. If we passed them all, we were in, subject to a test of loyalty. He whistled, and two of our men walked in and blindfolded us. Then we were shoved along for 5 or so minutes before being sat down forcefully. When our blindfolds were taken off, I could not believe what I was seeing. They had other people in there. They were all chained to the floor. At least a dozen people, just like us, that they had. The masked guy sat us down and told us that the first test was simple. To prove that we were serious, we had to choose one person to be tortured. Hearing this instantly made my stomach drop. I think the masked guy sensed this because he immediately started trying to reassure me. He was like, "Hey, don't worry. You only have to pick. You don't have to do any of it yourself. But you do have to watch." Fuck. I scanned the room. I didn't know what to do, and neither did my friend. How do you even make a decision like that? We kinda just sat in silence and shock for maybe 30 seconds before the masked guy started again. Started saying how he was bored, and that we now had 30 seconds to choose, or he would kill everyone in the room, starting with us. I climbed up. I couldn't speak. I went into a kind of a shocked panic. I literally could not purse my lips to form any words. I just froze up and could not do anything but shake. 20 seconds passed by, lightning fast, and the masked guy starts to do a countdown from 10. I still could not even react. I was going to die. The masked guy got to about 3 before my friend screamed, Him! In the most heart-wrenching pain I had ever heard from another person. The whole sequence of events was a blur after that. He had picked some old guy, completely malnourished, who was rotting away in a corner by himself. He did not even have the energy to fight back. They wheeled in some kind of table that faced us and went up vertically, so like the guy was standing while laying down and being strapped down. They strapped him to it. I was barely conscious for it. I tried to look away, but they came and held our heads and forced us to watch. Even then, I didn't really see properly. It was like my vision was out of focus, and I couldn't actually process what I was seeing in front of me. I remember them breaking out a whip, and the sound of the welts cracking the skin open. I remember that he tried to scream in pain, but his body did not even have the energy. The scream came out weak and barely audible. I remember them making small cuts before moving on to other tools. And then my vision just stops, and all I remember are the sounds. The sounds of flesh breaking, of skin ripping, and the eventual sounds of bones being cracked and shattered. And then I remember it all just stopped. They came and blindfolded me again, which I only knew because I felt it. I was not able to see again until they took it back off when I was in another room. It was just a plain beige room, with a rotting old wooden table in the middle, with 2 leather couches on either side. They sat me and my friend down on opposite sides. They restrained our arms behind our backs and told us not to move until we were told to. We were told that if we did, we would both die. The masked man then explains that they are short on time and patience, and that this will be the last test, that they can break us in properly later. I really don't know what he meant by that, and to be honest, I did not want to know. He pulls out a revolver from his pocket. My heart sinks. I can feel the sweat pooling on my forehead. I can see my friend's face, and he is completely locked up. The masked man loads the gun with one bullet, and then places it down onto the table. He explains that only one of us will be accepted into his society. He says that the only person with enough guts to kill his friend will be allowed to live and join. He tells us we have 1 minute on the clock to talk to each other before he unties our restraints. After that, he says we will have 1 minute to act and make a decision, and that if no decision is made, he will kill us both. I start trying to talk to my friend, trying to convince him that we will be okay and that someone will come and get us. I start begging him to think things through and talk to me, but he won't. He is silent the entire minute that I try to talk to him. I can feel the tears welling up in my eyes as I beg him to work with me, and he just turns and looks in another direction. The masked man tells us that time is up and undoes our restraints. The instant that we are released, my friend grabs the gun and points it at my head. I start begging him for my life, but he tells me to shut the fuck up and to be silent. He tells me he is sorry, but that he doesn't want to die, that he has to do this, and that he does not have a choice. He puts the gun up against my forehead, and I close my eyes as tightly as I can. I can feel him trembling and hesitating. The masked man starts a countdown from 10. He gets to 3, and my friend pulls the trigger. I felt my heart stop, but I wasn't dead. No bullet came out of the gun. It was loud and frightened me, and made me think I was shot to death, but it was just a blank. At this point, I start hearing commotion outside and what sounds like sirens and shouting. I open my eyes and see the masked man pull out a gun and shoot my friend in the head. He just drops lifelessly onto the couch, and I scream and I try to run to him, but I am immediately restrained. The masked man ties my hands again and tells me that I failed the test and that I am going to die, that I will never be able to tell anyone what happened here. He starts to pour gasoline over everything and lights a match. Another masked guy comes in and tells him to hurry and that they need to leave and destroy everything. I thought it was over when he left the room. I thought I was going to burn to death while watching my dead friend lying there with a bullet hole in his head. I'll stop greentext there because my eyes are starting to well up again. Every time I recall what happened, it sends me back to that day and traumatizes me all over again, and I can't bear to think about it for too long. I don't want to leave you guys hanging, so I will type the rest as succinctly as I can. I was lucky enough that some cops found me in time and managed to pull me out. See, before I left, I told my dad where I was heading to. He'd known this was a hobby of mine for a while and always feared for my safety. He always thought that I would be stabbed by a vagrant or hobos and robbed or killed. So before I went out, we would always make a deal that if I didn't return home by a certain time, usually after a few hours, or at least call him to let him know about any delays, then he would call the cops to come and check on me. I don't know exactly how long had passed between me setting off and all of the other stuff, but it must have been a decent length of time. The police interviewed me, and I gave them my statement once I had recovered enough to talk. Those first few days in the hospital, I could barely say a word to anyone. It felt painful to even try. I couldn't even eat any food. I told them everything that happened in detail, made sure to mention the other people who were down there and what they did. The case was kept mostly private, but they told me that they found evidence other people had been kept down there for a while. All of the people I told them about were found dead. Most of anything of note that was down there burned before the fire department could get there. The mall was condemned and knocked down within the year. I don't know what happened to the case after that, or if they managed to find these guys and lock them up. The police would not tell me more after that. I never heard any reports of anything similar where I lived for the rest of my time living there, so I like to think they stopped them. Sorry for the anticlimactic and rushed ending. It just hurts to think about my friend. I wish I had never gotten into that stupid hobby, and then maybe he would still be okay. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Be me. Happened about a week ago from this date, at a jazz club. It's my first time playing in a jazz band. I am walking around looking for a place to piss. Find a bathroom in the far back side of the club. I start doing my business. A girl stumbles in screaming. She falls to the ground screaming, "Someone, anyone, help me." I, of course, run over to her. She appears to have been shot. She is wearing a 1950s getup with one of those fur coats. Blood is fucking everywhere, all over my suit on the floor. I tell her to hold still and that I would go and get someone. I sprint my suited up ass down the hall and get the manager and 2 security guards. Bust open the door. Nothing. No blood, no girl, no nothing. Look down at my suit. There is no blood on it at all. Fucking nope. Go back to the main room and take the stage play for a while. Suddenly, an old man appears out of the crowd and taps me on the shoulder. He says, "The manager told me you saw her." "Who?" I say, trying to play it off. "Dolly," the man responds. What the fuck? He goes on to explain that back in the 50s, when he used to bust tables here, this call girl would hang around the joint. She was apparently shot by a John in the bathroom over a money dispute, and apparently only appears to lone jazz players in the bathroom. Nope. Walking out to my car after the gig, see something on the hood of my car. It's a bloody fur coat. All of my nopes. This happened during my distant childhood. The story is true, though sadly, I have no proof. In 1986, our family bought a plot of land to build a dacha. My father worked in the civil service, and his organization had been granted a large piece of land that was then divided into small garden plots. These were sold at a low cost to employees. There was high demand, but thankfully, enough land for everyone. Each person received 600 square meters of untouched wilderness. The area was a clearing, bordered on 3 sides by forest, and on the 4th by a long, narrow lake. All this paradise lay about 40 kilometers away from our city. Today, with fuel prices so high, almost no one goes out there anymore. The gardens are overgrown and nearly abandoned, but back then, the place was alive with activity. Everyone built together. Some raised log cabins, others small wooden homes, and a few just parked trailers. Within a year, we had finished our own rustic-style log house, complete with an attic. I loved it there, and spent nearly all of my summers at the dacha. My parents worked during the week, so I stayed alone, waiting for them to visit on weekends. Our house was on the edge of our little settlement, the last one by the lake. One early morning I burst into our apartment, eyes wide, repeating over and over, "There it is, there it is." I don't remember this myself, but here is what my parents told me happened. That night, I suddenly woke up, jolted from sleep. The room was bathed in light, not from the lamp, but from outside. It took me a moment to realize that the brightness was coming through the window. Filled with a deep, primal fear, I forced myself to look. The light was like a searchlight, sweeping across the ground in short, deliberate arcs. I realized it was coming from above. Pressing my face to the glass, I looked up and saw something massive hovering in the sky, scanning the area with its beam. Just as I stood there, frozen in shock, the beam shot directly at me and blinded me. Screaming, I ran to the far corner of the room and crouched behind the wardrobe. The light disappeared, but I stayed hidden there until dawn. As soon as it was light enough, I bolted to the bus stop and caught the first shift bus. By 8 a.m. I was home. I told my parents everything before collapsing into bed and sleeping until evening. They did not believe me, but they were deeply unsettled by how frightened I was. There are two important details. First, when I woke up later that day, I remembered absolutely nothing. My parents had to retell me the entire incident that I had just described to them hours earlier. Second, a few days later, we found out that one of our neighbors, an older woman, had also seen the light. She did not look out the window because she was too terrified, and perhaps that is what spared her from having her memory wiped too. About a month later, we hosted a small gathering at the dacha. That night, I stepped outside and looked up just in time to see something strange over the forest. It was a cigar-shaped object with beams of light coming from underneath. The sky was clear and bright enough that I could see it clearly. It wasn't far, maybe a kilometer away. Overcome with a strange mix of fear and excitement, I yelled out to everyone. Everyone came rushing out, asking, "Where? Where?" They had been drinking and could not focus their eyes right away. My dad was the last one to come outside. He was loading his hunting rifle. "I will lock that thing up myself," he muttered. At that point, no one cared about the UFO anymore. They were all focused on calming down my father and taking away the gun. Meanwhile, the object silently vanished from the sky. About a year later, my sister and I were biking through the forest in the area where I had seen the object. We got lost following animal trails and ended up in a huge clearing, but it wasn't a normal meadow. The ground was covered with boulders so densely that walking across it was nearly impossible. Grass grew between the stones, but it looked withered and lifeless. No birds, no insects, just an unnatural silence hanging over everything. The place gave us both a terrible, creeping feeling. Without a word, we turned and fled from there as fast as we could. This took place around 2020 in the winter. Happened in a small town in Virginia. All began on around a 5-hour drive I had to take from my house. On the way there, I was talking to my uncle about cryptids and how the mountain range we were hunting in was known for sightings. At the time, I was 17 years old, and we were deer hunting. We had soon gotten to our campground and set up the trucks and campers. Once we were all set up, we grabbed our rifles and headed to our spot. It was my first time in this part of the woods. It was just me, my grandfather, my uncle, and my little cousin. We had driven out to some spots to check out, but at one of these spots there was a corpse of a doe that was mutilated and shredded. The range was known for bears, but there were no bears in this area. We had thought maybe it was just coyotes or other scavengers, so I brushed it off. I soon decided to break away and walk about 4 miles north to this one spot that my uncle decided to talk about. I carried my Winchester 30-30 rifle and walkie-talkie as I branched off. It was serene and nice. I decided to take a spot in a valley that had a decent view. A couple of hours passed by, and there was nothing really in sight. I called over the walkie-talkie and stated that I was heading back. On the way back, there were tracks from a deer and some mud that was not too far away from me. I continued to roam around and followed these tracks. I put a round in the chamber just in case. I got about halfway back to where I was supposed to be when I saw a head poke out from behind the tree. It was a ragged-looking 6-point buck. I slowly pulled the rifle up. I had the book and my scope, but something was different. Its body looked as if the deer was something from a cheap zombie movie. At the time, I was just reading about a disease going around which made the deer look and act very differently. I dropped the sight when it took off into the brush. I called back over and told my uncle that I had seen a buck and described its features. I got back to my uncle being picked up by his truck. We made our way back to the camp, and that night, everything seemed usual and normal. The next morning I woke up with a splitting headache and felt as if somebody was watching me. During the night, we had all suited up and stepped out of the camper to see tracks around our site, but it was not only one set. There were multiple sets of tracks, but it looked like it was going from human to deer again and again. We decided to head back out to the spots we took the previous day, but this time it was just my uncle, since he wanted to see the spot I had taken. Then I showed him the spot where the tracks were. He had just told me to call him over on the walkie if anything was weird. He headed back to his original spot, and I changed spots. I went about a mile east of my position. I was now sitting on the downslope of a valley with a stream running through it. An hour or so passed by with nothing happening. I then heard a set of steps closing near me, but it was more like a person walking on the leaves and not like an animal on all fours. I called over the walkie-talkie to see if my uncle was the one who somehow was making it to my position. He stated that he wasn't, but to be on high alert since hunters are out there. But as he was speaking, a loud crash came from near me, as if someone had thrown a giant rock into the tree beside me. My instinct was to kick around into the chamber and send a warning shot. Once fired, the steps sprinted off and faded away, but not as far as I thought they would. They stopped about 75 feet, and they looked at me. I could just feel the sensation of being stared at. My uncle called over and told me to get back ASAP since he heard the crash and the gunfire. I made my way up to the incline and put a new round into the chamber. As I started to see the crest, I noticed the same 6-point deer standing there staring at me with these dark black eyes. They were empty and looked as if they were just bottomless pits. It had shown itself when it stood up, with its bones cracking and claws emerging from its skin. At this point, the body was mutilated and still changing. I sent another round into it. I got it in the side, and it let out a deafening screech. I made a break for the path. I could hear it on the pathway gaining on me. As I was slowing down, I made it to where the woodline breaks. I saw my uncle taking a stance that you would take if you were waiting to shoot the thing behind someone. As I got closer, I turned around to see nothing. I explained what had happened, and he believed me completely. He had stated that this wasn't the first time he had had odd things happen to him while in these woods. We soon picked up the pace and packed up everything and got into the truck. We got inside and sped out of there. What is living in the mountain ranges of Virginia? This happened a few years ago, and it still freaks me the fuck out. Be me, I am just 16 years old at the time. I just moved to Germany. Family finds this old ass house from before World War I to move into. It is fucking massive. Family lets me choose between having the room in the basement or the attic. I choose basement for its shower. Worst choice of my entire life. First night there, I started seeing shit out of the corner of my eye. Always thought I saw something small like an animal in the other room. Brushed it off as my cat or dog, just exploring the new place. After about a year living there, I started hearing things too. Little things like my mom yelling my name when she didn't. I told her after a little while. She took me to a therapist a few days later. Did fuck all. As time went on, I saw more and more things, and they became more and more clear. If I didn't look at them when I saw them, they would not go away, and I was able to sort of see what the shadow things were. Dark grey looking thing that looked like a hobbit. After I figured that out, I told my therapist what it was. He looked at me like I was crazy, gave me some sort of pill, said it would help me stop seeing and hearing things. Once again, it did not do fucking anything at all. Got used to it after a while, until one night, 3 years after I moved in. Laying in my bed, when I heard feet slapping the floor. I saw a shadow thing move in the left corner of my eye. Zoom my head to the left. It does not go away. Fuck. It's a little human looking thing that is skinny as fuck. Only its head was not human. It was a fucking cat head. We stared at each other for what felt like 10 minutes. I shat myself. Right as I was about to get up and turn my light on, it just fucking vanished. I moved to the attic the day after. It has been 3 years since I saw that fucker, and I still do not know what it was. I never saw it again after I moved upstairs, but whenever I would go downstairs, I would always see shit out of the corner of my eye. Be me, 15 or so years old at the time. Abandoned house and filled with trees, covering the side exposed to the woods. Popular place for stoners and graffiti. I hear a rumor about a satanic basement. 4 or 5 friends and I go looking around. First go inside house. Already kids there doing their thing. Start stomping around on floor to hear for a hollow part to see if the basement actually exists. It does. Look around for any entrance / any way in. Find a cellar door type entrance covered with leaves and nature. Go inside. No graffiti. Smell of weed, but typical pentagram bullshit that the people who started the rumor probably did. Here is the weird part. There is a freshly lit candle, like just standing to collect wax. Blow one out. Goes out no big deal. No other entrance or exit. Not even windows. Take shitty cell phone pictures to send to friends. Get bored. Leave room. Tell everyone getting high to go check it out. Week or so later. Wanna fuck around in the basement again. Look for cellar door entrance. Gone. Jump around on same spots to find the basement. No hollow sound. Ask people from last time. Remember, and nope out when we can't find it. Months later. House torn down. Ask crew about the basement. Said no way anyone built a basement on that plot of land. Get really creeped out. Going to look for my old phone with the picture, but it was one of their shitty version IG Envy phones. I don't think it was real satanic shit, but I don't know what the fuck happened in that basement.